Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I am entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, who tonight is phoning in from an undisclosed location. Where are you now?
I think it's like a Fairfield Inn, to be quite honest, here in Charleston, West Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah, so business has called, and they said that I need to be in Charleston for a week, hanging out with a whole bunch of other small business owners. So we're making this happen, so that way we get this episode out on time. So thank you, Dave, for getting this edited.
As always, we wouldn't get this stuff done without Dave. Dave is the miracle worker, especially given some of the lack of quality audio I've handed him over the past year or so. Always amazed he can do decent stuff.
Well, let's see what he can do with my hotel audio today.
There we go. All right. So picking up here, and again, I apologize, folks. I know this is where we share the wicked news. Though I did you see for the Kids Summer for Universal, Elphaba and Galinda are back doing meet and greets out in California at Universal Hollywood?
Jim, we talk a little bit about that later in the show, and I made sure to make that the last bullet point so that way we can get the streak going again, because I think we broke the streak a couple weeks ago, but back to number one, guys. You start with one. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah, there's some wicked news.
All right. Well, there you go. Something to go forward to later. Plus, we're headed into hot summer months, and when we get to the feature, we're going to talk about fires at the Universal Studios Hollywood. But before we do that, we have to acknowledge our sponsors. And in this case, of course, it is unlockmagic.com. And if you're planning a trip to Universal Land or the Walt Disney World Resort, please check out unlockmagic.com. Listeners to the Epic Universal Podcast are saving up to 12% on theme park tickets and now have the ability to purchase Express Pass through Unlock Magic, saving them even more money. So be sure and visit unlockmagic.com and save today. So, again, impressed that while you were on the road, while you were from the house, you were still able to dig up a pile of Universal news for this week's show. So, what do we have at the top of the pile?
Well, Jim, we talked last week about that leaked Universal Kids date that came through. Well, it wasn't, like I've always said, is we'll record an episode typically on like a Tuesday or maybe a Wednesday, and then Universal loves to give news on that Thursday and before we release on a Friday. So it came out by the time you listen that news came out. July 1st is the grand opening, and we do have prices for Universal Kids Resorts. So the leak was real, and it is a real thing. So did you kind of get to check out any of like the admission and how that's going to work?
Yeah, and again, want to stress here, folks, this is Universal's first regional park, and again, aiming at parents with small children. So it's really kind of the Legoland model. So price points are kind of similar to what you might see at a Legoland. We've got a one-day general admission, $54.99, with a two-day park admission going for $73.99. Is that right?
Yeah. So it looks like they kind of want you in there for 2 days. I mean, the huge savings there. So if they figure they get you 2 days, they probably also get you for the hotel as well, which last I checked, I think hotel rooms were around $400 or so. So it's a little bit more pricey, but they don't have as many options in rooms. But since this is regional, they're also kind of going after annual pass holders.
Yeah. Now, this is fascinating because I have to say that the price point alone for what they're calling the silver annual pass, which bundles in parking as well, is kind of stunning.
Yeah, it's $130. So you could go to maybe Epic or the Magic Kingdom for one day, or you can go to Universal Kids every day minus blackouts. So they do have blackouts on this. But if you want to spring for another, $35, you get the annual pass. That one is the park with the parking. So the silver annual pass is $129.99 with parking, $164.99. So pretty much like peak day Magic Kingdom, But did you see about the kids? I thought this was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what's kind of interesting about the Universal Kids Park, and again, remember this is aimed at parents with small children, and the assumption is you're there with multiple kids,
Right.
and so what's interesting is at least starting out, Universal Kids, if you have a child 2 and under, they will be admitted free and will not need a ticket. Which again, for the first couple of years at least, that's a really smart move.
Hook them early. Yeah.
Yep,
I mean,
that's it
get them in
exactly.
there. And I mean, they're probably going after people that have multiple kids at that level, or get them, when you get there. I mean, I think Disney, and it's been a while, I don't have a 3-year-old, but you were able to get children into the parks 3 and under, and I was never at Universal with a 3-year-old. We didn't transfer over there. I wonder if that's the same policy and then they just kind of added a year. But I almost felt like it would have been okay if they said all children you charge here, because that's kind of what this park is made for. So I wouldn't have been surprised that, like, all right, 1-year-old's $25, but it's nice that they're 2 and under are free, and they get you in there, and then when they keep asking year after year, I want to go back, and now you got to pay for them. So not a bad idea.
There you go.
And they got some weird packages. Did you see?
Yes. Let's talk about this, because that kind of an intriguing setup. So what is it? The Universal Kids Resort hotel package. So it's 2 hotel nights and 1.5 days of general admission, right?
Yeah, but they also have early park admission 1 hour before regular opening. But interesting 1.5 day admission. So what that does is that lets you get into the parks at 2 p.m. On one day, and then you get the full day. So they're almost saying it's not a multi-day park, but I think that's just coming in with travelers, right? They're assuming people are coming for traveling.
I would argue, yes, that they're assuming 2-day package. People will drive in for the day, and I think about it. When does the hotel typically let you in? So it's like, all right, you arrive at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You're there with small children, so probably all you're doing is exploring the hotel and eating, and then you might not even go to the park the first day. Then you do your full day, and then you can either do your remaining half day. But that's kind of interesting, though. The half day is the 2 o'clock. Right. So maybe they're burying the needle in the other direction. They're assuming that when you get there for the first day, you'll want to go immediately to the park, and then do your full day with early entry the next day.
I've never seen a 1.5 day, but we're into decibels now, so it's just it's fun. Well, and then we also come to the conclusion this is seasonal, so they did kind of announce when you go on there, you can look at what days it's available, and you do have seasonal closure, so to speak. So it's not open every single day like other parks. It looks to me like November 3rd and 4th, November 10th and 11th, and November 17th, 18th, and the 26th are all going to be closed, along with the 25th of December, and January closures are January 5th through the 8th, 11th through the 15th, and January 19th to the 31st. So, Jim, have you been to Texas in the winter time? Because I've never, so I don't really know what the temperatures are.
No, I only know about this by proxy that Jim Schul and Tracy have family out in this part of the world, and yes, that's the interesting thing about Texas. Texas is big, and there are parts of Texas that are warm the whole time, and there are parts of Texas that get brutally cold. And I assume Frisco must be somewhere in the middle, to justify this sort of operating schedule. But again, it's the first year, so we will see what's going on.
Yeah, we could just say they're pro, their employees. They just want to give the employees the holidays off, right?
There we go. All right. And speaking of holidays at the Universal Park, we have our Halloween Horror. But of course, in Vegas, we have horror all the year round with Horror Unleashed. And we're now, they seem to be further adjusting what they're doing there. So, talk to me with these rotating horror experiences through next year.
Yeah, well, it was at Monster Palooza, which thank you everyone that sent this over on social media, because I didn't know this was happening, but I got a lot of messages through Instagram and I think Twitter and a couple here that were like, hey, there's going to be an Universal Horror Unleashed presentation at Monster Palooza. And then you start seeing it out on the feeds that there is a picture and it is a calendar of events. And it turns out that they had a couple individuals talk at this, at this conference about all what's coming up. And it seems like they gave a lot of information. Now, some of it's a little vague, but they not only released the schedule for 2026, but they also released the schedule for 2027. So, and if you look out online, you'll see like the timeline, but a couple things that are worth noting is, they are doing a Feaster Grievings, which they did last year. Remember that creepy Easter bunny?
Yep.
So that's coming back.
Okay.
And then there's new things like Food Film Frights in May and September. And then there's a surprise announcement that they're going to run June through August. Then there's also elements of they're doing a like Jack's at Premiere House, and the Hamikuma, I believe that's that creepy looking bear. Right? I believe, is that the right name? And then we see Krampus and Kin back again. That was there last year. So that is to kind of round out 2026, along with Valentine's Day for the next year. And then there's going to be a new Jack show, Feaster Grievings, that's really when we already had Feaster Grievings this year. There's going to be an anime horror experience, more food film frights, and then there's all new Halloween maze. So they basically give us a list of things to look forward to. So all this being said, we talked about it a while ago. They have extra rooms. They have extra spaces. We talked on previous shows about, especially the one where we reviewed this, how they could utilize some of this space. I mean, is that what you're seeing here, Jim? Is that they're now going to be like, all right, we have all this. We're going to give you reasons to come back multiple times a year?
Yeah, and what's fascinating, at least to me, is that, looking at this calendar that they shared, I mean, they break it out as there are special things they're doing, nightly. But again, they make a point of specifying what's a premiere house and more to the point, what's going to go into the flex space, which, what folks had referred to about, there are rooms they've been holding back that they're going to move into. So, wow, I applaud the fact that they've decided to lean into this being that much more dynamic. I mean, to my way of thinking, that's how you build a fan base.
Right.
You turn this into the sort of thing that every time you go, there's something different and new that you have to check out.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where, when we went out there, we're like, hey, it wasn't super, super busy. Like there were elements, and some people were like, well, is this going to last? Well, I mean, if they're giving us schedules up until 2027, I mean, they're all in. This isn't a thing that they said, hey, we're going to set this up and, all right, we didn't make enough money year one. I imagine they had some type of, dedicated, all right, this is what we think we're going to have to do to build a fan base and what we're going to have to do to get people to come back. And I think this will really see if that continues, if we see bumps and probably surveys for return visitors, right? Too. Like they're going to know if you came back.
Absolutely.
And I think this is a good play, a smart play. And, as someone who did not think they would like these Halloween Horror Night things at all, I actually think about it all the time. I'm like, yeah, I would go back, and I would absolutely go back. It was not as intimidating as I thought, and I think a lot of people that maybe have not tried it will try it and fall in love with it because maybe they're not Orlando people, maybe they're West Coasters. So I kind of like the idea of it.
Yeah, I guess my only question here is, because face it, this is being announced, almost a full year into, the launch of this. Well, first of all, what's going on with the Chicago Horror Unleashed? And, is this going to be the same thing? Is that are they going to get it open and get their feet under them and then announce something like this? Or is this something something that's going to be part of Chicago from day one?
That's a great question. I think we need to look up on Chicago. I haven't seen anything come out lately, but that just means we got to dig a little deeper. So yeah, well, maybe on the next couple of shows, we'll figure out what the heck's going on in Chicago.
There we go. But all right, so this is out in Vegas. On the other hand, as we continue to the west, we get to Universal Hollywood, and we were talking at the top of the show about the stuff that's going on at that theme park for what they're calling their mega movie summer. And one of the more interesting aspects is sort of helping to cross-promote Christopher Nolan's new film, The Odyssey, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cross promotion here because if you look at Christopher Nolan's movie that's coming out, when is that coming out? Is it July maybe?
Yeah, that and I keep being told, every time I open a press release that IMAX, you need to see this in IMAX. Oh my God, so.
Yeah, but so they filmed it. They filmed part of this because I remember when we were covering it, there were people that were showing like pictures of this being filmed on the backlot. But what they're doing now is they're going to actually have the ship in the backlot tour during this time frame. So I think that is as beautiful synergy as you can. You go through, you see this ship, you're like, I want to go see the movie, kind of deal. But that's not the only thing that's on display. I think they're doing the Trojan Horse, which. I mean, I'm familiar with the Odyssey. I obviously haven't seen it, but that's going to happen in City Walk in front of the cinema. So, hey, there's this giant horse, and now we can go see the movie. And to me, it would be beautiful if that's how they got you out of it, like the little trams. You go right in the Trojan Horse, and they cart you over to the movie, and you go right in. Because isn't that how it should be done?
There's just a part of me that, again, when the Trojan Horse and, how they use that to sneak into the city, it's just, for me, it's funny to park a 30-foot tall Trojan Horse, outside of a theater, which has a policy that you can't sneak in food, so it's like... it's like, all right,
fill it with popcorn.
There we go. That's it exactly. I've just got my Trojan Horse with me. He loves movies.
That's right. That is beautiful. I mean, that's great. But it looks like the Minions movie, which is coming out as well. So you're going to be able to
Minions and Monsters.
Yeah. So it's new Minions, and I don't know their names. I apologize, but it's Minions Henry and James. They're new. Are these new Minions?
To explain, this is actually set. This film is set in the early days of Hollywood. This predates the Minions working with Gru. So we're meeting, Minions from the 1920s, Henry and James. But at the same time, what they're doing in the sort of Illuminations land at this theme park. I mean, you've got Gru's home, the neighborhood there, and that's home to the Minions Mayhem attraction. And, and across the way is the Secret Life of Pets dark ride. But there's a wonderful little kiddie play area back there, Super Silly Funland. And here, we're going to get a Minions dance party, and the quick service restaurant there, the Minions Cafe, has a summer menu. And I was already talking about this. One of the things they're offering is it's carbonara. Nancy will tell you, that anytime I open a menu and there's carbonara on it, it's like, I'm done. That's it. That's what I'm eating. So it's like, ooh, I now have an excuse to go back to Universal Hollywood. I need to see the giant Trojan Horse, and I need to eat some carbonara.
Well, I think we're going to be out there in August, so I don't know how this. Yeah, I think D23 is after August 9th, so we'll see how it sticks around. But yeah, they're also doing. We also have Hollywood and Dine. There's some Fast and Furious food, so there's Drift and Dine, so there's new menus there. And then I don't know if you saw, there's select Jaws themed food items at Mel's Diner, which looks really fun.
Yeah, the shark bait burger. I'm sorry, I may default to the Amity Island funnel cake. I don't know if I want shark bait on a burger. I still remember Roy Scheider, shoveling chum over the side of the boat. And what happens there?
Well, would you do any Hello Kitty Jaws Blueberry Sundae? I mean, I imagine this is Hello Kitty. You know how they do like the parodies with Hello Kitty, which is great.
Yeah. Well, no. And what's kind of interesting, I don't know if you heard Drew talk about this on the most recent fine tuning, but he has buddies that are actually directing. There is a Hello Kitty feature-length animated film coming.
I heard that from you guys. I had questions. Yes.
Well, I particularly have questions because according to Drew and his buddies, again, who are working on this movie, is like Hello Kitty is actually an 8-year-old girl in a catsuit. And not only that, she's an 8-year-old English girl. And it's like, all this time?
Right.
You know?
All this time, not only she is a little girl dressed like a kitty, dressed like Jaws now. Like it's these parodies are only like one more step. It's almost as crazy as like this whole time. A lot of people, I didn't know Bluey was a girl for the longest time, and I'm like, these things blow your mind, and you will get yelled at online. So sooner or later,
I will. Laura D reached out, and politely corrected myself and Mr. Testa. Yes, and we, on the most recent Disney dish, literally at the top of the show, I fell on my sword and was like, we said he was a boy, and she's not.
Well, at least we're getting Hello Kitty right. You know, now we know that Hello Kitty is not a kitty, right? So we're going to help everybody out there. And Jim, you mentioned at the beginning of the show, last but not least, obviously, that part of the Universal Studios Hollywood mega movie summer would not be what it is if it wasn't for Elphaba and Galinda and their wicked photo op at the Fast and Furious Street Racers dance show. I don't know if they're meeting there or if that's just an added bonus. So I think the cars, are they dancing again, or is it just people?
I don't know. And in fact, that's the other bit of news that kind of intrigues me. I mean, face it, we who have been, when we have complained this past winter and spring, it was about two things. It's like we didn't have an opening date for Universal Kids down in Frisco, and we did not have an opening date for Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift. And this is what fascinates me. We have our Hollywood and Dine that has a brand new Fast and Furious menu. We have a Fast and Furious Street Racer dance show that's going to be staged in the upper lot. So it's like, I look at those two things, and doesn't that mean that a certain roller coaster's opening would be imminent? Yes? No?
Well, what was it last week? We were talking about the VIP Halloween Horror Nights packages, but I don't think they started until September, and one of those had like the exclusive ride. So I guess we still don't really have an opening date, but it's obviously very soon. I think there's, every day there's people riding it or there's definitely been situations where we've seen people testing it. So we're probably pretty close.
All right. Well, let's hope for another leak then. All right. And the nice thing about leaks is that means you have a lot of water, which means you can put out a fire. And speaking of fires, when we get back from this break, we're going to talk about the history of fires at the Universal Studios out in Hollywood. And they've been going on there of varying size for 95 years. But before we do that, there's this.
By the time I hit my 50s, I'd learned a few things, like how family is precious. Work can always wait. And 99% of people over 50 already have the virus that causes shingles. Not everyone at risk will develop it, but I did. The painful, blistering rash disrupted my life for weeks. Don't learn about your shingles risk the hard way. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
Hey, I like your new RAV4.
Thanks, yours too.
What does RAV stand for anyway?
To me, it's the Remarkably Advanced Vehicle.
Really? To me, it's the Runway Approved Vehicle for its amazing style.
What about Remarkably Adaptable Vehicle because of its versatile cargo space?
Or Really Admired Vehicle?
Oh, or Really Awesome Vehicle.
It really is the recreational activity vehicle. The stylish 2026 Toyota RAV4 Limited. What's your RAV4?
And we're back. Okay, so if you previously listened to this podcast, you know that Eric and I have talked about, well, these things that are located on the tram tour out in California called J-Banks. And these are the things that Jay Stein, a gentleman who worked in the early days of the Universal Tour, set up along the way of the tram route to, the idea was that if you were at the, they were at Universal on a day when they weren't shooting, or, you weren't able to peer into a soundstage or that sort of thing, but there'd be these entertaining moments that you'd encounter on your tram tour. And one of them that actually ran in the park from 1973 through 1992 was the burning house facade. And have you ever seen pictures of that, Eric? The perpetually burning house?
Yes, and use lots of fuel, right?
Yes, there we go. That personally destroyed much of the ozone layer over Southern California. But anyway, today we're not talking about fake house fires. We are talking about real fires that happen at Universal Studios out in Hollywood. And as I mentioned, the number of them have happened over the past 95 years. 8, actually. And collectively, they have caused tens of millions of dollars in damage. Okay, now, first 2 fires, Aaron. The first one happened back in October of 32. And remember, the Universal City as a place to make movies, that sort of thing, starts in 1912, gets officially founded 1915. So, we're 20 years in before our first fire. On the other hand, second fire happens in June of 49, and in both cases, you got to remember this used to be a remote location up in the San Fernando Valley, and these were brush fires that started high up in the hills that surrounded Universal and then swept down into the studio proper. And the first one in 32 did $100,000 in damage. It took out 4 film sets, including a full-size recreation of a steamship. And you'd think there'd be water around the steamship that you could throw on it and put it out. On the other hand, second fire in 49, that quickly spread to the 6 Points, Texas section of the lower lot, and we've talked about that on previous editions of the podcast. This is where Universal shot the bulk of its westerns since back in the silent era. And what was kind of interesting about the fire in 49 is 300 Universal studio employees worked with local firefighters. The way they put that out, Eric, is they formed a bucket brigade and were hauling water out of the Singapore-themed lagoon, on the lower lot, which I thought was kind of cool.
That only seems like something that would be in the movies. You would not think that would actually work.
Exactly. But no, it worked. Now, next fire at Universal Hollywood. This happened September of 57, and it flattens their original New York street, which was made up at that time of faux brownstones and fake tenements. And in this case, $500,000 worth of damage to the lower lot. And though studio officials could never prove it, it was suspected that this one, the September 57 fire, that was arson. All right, so we jump ahead a decade. Same thing happens, or the same thing was said about the fire that happened at Universal in May of 67. Somebody set a fire inside of a barn down on Laramie Street. That's another Western-themed area adjacent to 6 Point, Texas. And the flames then spread from Laramie Street to Denver Street and eventually engulf much of Little Europe on the lower lot. So all told, Eric, 10 acres of sets were consumed. And what was interesting is firefighters were able to make a stand at Spartacus Street. And, they stopped the blaze there, but all told, $1 million, in damage was done.
I think they keep thinking to themselves, why isn't this happening in the flash flood zone? It would be so much easier if the fires would start in the flash flood area.
There we go. There we go. Just dump the water and you're done. Speaking of Little Europe, though, I want to talk for a moment about Scooby-Doo Meets the Universal Monsters, Mystery in the Backlot. This was that thing that was held earlier this year on the lower lot as part of the 2026 edition of the Universal Fan Fest Nights. If you don't recall, folks, that's that hard ticket event that was held after hours at Universal Studios Hollywood from April 23rd of this year through May 16th. And, when Universal was hyping this specific aspect of FanFest Nights, they talked about how Scooby-Doo Meets the Universal Monsters was going to be this immersive walkthrough adventure designed to give guests the sensation of stepping into a live-action mystery. And so the experience was described as guests will travel to the destination via studio tram tour, and they'll then have the chance to walk along a movie studio backlot with Scooby himself and Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Shaggy. And what'll be interesting, especially about this escapade, is that guests are going to be solving a mystery that involves the legendary Universal monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, Bride of Frankenstein, and Wolfman. And during when they're solving this mystery, guests will get to navigate portions of Universal's world-famous outdoor film sets. And then they talk specifically about Little Europe, the original filming locations of historic Universal horror films like Frankenstein from 1931 and Wolfman from 1941. Eric, I don't want to be that guy, but you don't get to visit Little Europe, the world-famous outdoor film set where Frankenstein was shot in 31 or Wolfman was shot in 41, if that part of the lower lot actually burned down in 1957. Can you walk through a recreation of that outdoor film set? Absolutely. But I'm just saying, don't sell, what was rebuilt on the lower lot as the original filming location. That seems disingenuous at best.
So you're telling me, Jim, for all those people that are screaming about the carousel progress being, changed now because Walt physically touched this version, you're saying you would also argue that, in 1994 they redid it and they also redid it at another time. So you're saying similar circumstance. You can't really rest on that argument.
Yeah, no. And yes, it has been interesting this past week to watch the Disney, fan community turn themselves inside out about Carousel of Progress, because it's like, wow, that show? Really? That show?
Well, they say Walt touched it, and we're like, well, he kind of, right? Just like you're kind of getting to where the Monsters movies were made, kind of, right?
Kind of. Okay. All right. Back now to our fire-related feature. Just a moment ago, we were talking about how in 57, firefighters were able to stop displays right when right before it reached the edge of where Stanley Kubrick was having sets built for Spartacus. By the way, Universal would eventually release that long in production costume drama in October of 1960, and by the way, took home 4 Academy Awards for their trouble. Unfortunately, Spartacus Square was not quite as fortunate the next time a fire broke out on the lower lot. September of 87, all of that elaborate 3-story outdoor set burned to the ground, and also the studio lost, 4 production buildings were damaged by this blaze. And again, it was estimated at the time, given the structures and the equipment that were lost, Universal is now looking at $2.5 million in damages from this particular conflagration. But oh my God, Eric, that was nothing compared to what happened on November 9th, 1990. All right. This is when a massive, deliberately set fire broke out at Universal Studios Hollywood on the backlot and then destroyed a fifth of the studio's standing sets, causing an estimated $50 million in damage. But this is the part of it I know you're going to love. All right. The fire was caused by a security guard, one Michael J. Houston, who, by the way, you're gonna love this, Eric. He worked for the Burns International Security Services.
Jeez.
All right, and better, and again, weird little Disney bend on this story. Houston had been hired to watch over 20 classic cars, which were being used in production of Oscar, which was this period comedy that starred Sylvester Stallone that Disney was shooting on Universal's lower lot. And side note, Disney did this a lot. The summer previous, 1989, they shot Dick Tracy with Warren Beatty and Madonna on Universal's New York streets. And then in the fall of 1990, Disney is back again using this very same portion of the lower lot, but now New York Street is dressed to look like it's back in the 30s, hence all of these classic cars. And anyway, Mr. Houston, who is a new hire with Burns Security, only had been working for the company for a month at that point. He was looking to prove that he was this conscientious employee, someone that, his company should definitely promote, as soon as possible. And so he came up with this scheme to make himself look like a hero. He pulled out his pocket lighter and started a small fire on the Universal backlot with the idea that, well, I will then put this out and then I will report my efforts to Universal Studios management, who will in turn tell my bosses at Burns Security, and voila, instant promotion. Unfortunately, what Mr. Houston failed to take into consideration were the Santa Ana winds, which happened in Southern California from the early fall through the late spring. These are strong, hot, dry winds that sometimes can reach gusts of 40 to 60 miles an hour. And if you light a fire outside while the Santa Anas are blowing, it is literally a recipe for disaster. So Michael J., he pulls out his lighter. He starts a tiny little fire on Brownstone Street. By the way, just up the block from where Universal shot The Sting back in '73. And by the way, that film won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. But now the wind comes up, and, first this fire, Eric, it consumes New York Street, which, again, want to remind you, has already burned down once, all right, back in September of 57. So this is the second time that New York Street on the lower lot has gone up in smoke. But this time around, what also goes up are the sets from Ben-Hur. Likewise, all of Courthouse Square, except weirdly enough, the courthouse. So it's all the buildings around the clock tower where Back to the Future was shot. And then the fire spreads to the point that it actually damages show buildings that house 2 of the more popular aspects of the Universal Tram Tour, the King Kong Encounter. That originally opened back in June of '86, and featured a 30-foot tall, 6.5-ton animatronic version of that awesome ape. And then Earthquake, the big one, that opened in March of '89, and that's where the Cinemagicians that work at Universal Creative, they spent $13 million to recreate an 8.3 on the Richter scale earthquake. And by the way, just to circle back to those 21 classic cars that Michael J. Houston is supposed to be standing guard over, they're gone. They just go up. Anyway, it took more than 400 Los Angeles City and County firefighters, who, by the way, were assisted by a half a dozen water-dropping helicopters to finally get this blaze under control. And in the end, Eric, a 4 square acre chunk of Universal's lower lot is lost. And as for Michael J. Houston, he winds up being sentenced to 4 years in prison in January of 92 for again, the crime of arson. But just as they had done with the fires of 32 and 49 and 57 and 67 and 87, because Universal Studios Hollywood is a working production facility where dozens of movies and TV shows are filmed every year. As soon as the debris from this blaze was cleared away, they began rebuilding. And I know we were joking about this on a recent, Epic Universal podcast, we all run everything by Steven Spielberg. But Steven Spielberg was actually consulted by Universal Studios Hollywood management as they were rebuilding New York Street about, well, how do we make this better for modern filmmakers to shoot on. Oh, and also, you'll love this. The very first film to shoot on this now brand new section of the lower lot is Disney's Newsies, which Disney then sends out into theaters in April of 92. But again, irony here is with all of the backlot blazes we've talked about so far, we haven't even gotten to the really big Universal fire. And this was the one that Eric actually wanted me to talk about, the one that happened in June of 2008. And we're going to get to that story in a sec. But first, this. And we're back. You enjoying your fireside chat here about the Universal Studios Hollywood fires, Eric?
Jim, I was going to say, it's a pyromaniac's favorite episode. It's absolutely 5 stars from all. It's
funny.
It's making me wonder, like, how many, like, did we, when I went to Universal Studios Hollywood, was anything original? Like, is it all just recreated?
Well, it's a movie studio, and they are very dynamic,
right?
And more to the point, resilient. In fact, to double back just for a sec to the big Universal fire of November of 1990, and for me, Eric, it really says a lot about the team members out in Hollywood that they had this huge fire, and the very next day they're open for business. If you were on vacation and you were staying in the Universal Sheraton, the Universal Hilton, it's like, come on in, get on the tram, we'll drive you by the smoldering debris.
Oh, they were like, it's the tram tour. We have one fake flaming house, the rest are real, guys.
Yeah. Well, no, and thank you for bringing that up, because that, oddly enough, was up and running the very next day. And you think somebody might have thought, maybe we'll turn that off.
Yeah, that's a little bad taste, but I guess whatever.
All right. That said, though, obviously, as we mentioned earlier in the show, the King Kong encounter and Earthquake, the big one, those J-bangs that were located on the tram route, those closed for a while they had to fix, the damage to the exterior of the building, and there was also smoke damage inside, that sort of thing. Those didn't return to become regular parts of the tram till the late winter, early spring of 91. But coming out of the November 1990 fire, Universal decided they needed to make some changes to the lower lot. That
sprinklers, Jim, sprinklers.
Well, the weird part of it is that they knew from what happened in June of 49, when they did that bucket brigade thing, that they just didn't have, the interesting thing is the way it was explained to me is that a lot of the plumbing that had been put into Universal dated back to the late 1910s, the early 1920s. And this is when Carl Laemmle, he began transforming the old Taylor Ranch property into a movie-making complex. And historically, Universal didn't have great water pressure. It was way away from everything. And let's be honest, if you don't have great water pressure, you're going to be in a bind when you have to fight a fire, especially a fast-moving fire. And Eric's not wrong, by the way. After the November 1990 fire, again, we talked about when they were pulling water out of the Singapore Lake on the Backlot. During the November 1990 fire, things got so dire. Again, LA city and county firefighters actually ran hoses down to that pond where the mechanical Jaws shark is. And, they were pulling water out of that to fight this fire. So anyway, when they go to rebuild New York Street again in the late 90s, late 1990, early 91, as Eric suggested, it wasn't just sprinklers. It was what was known as a deluge system. This was put on the uppermost floor of the sets down in the lower lot, and with the notion that were a fire to break out again, this would allow Universal to suddenly, turn a switch, and a crazy amount of water would then come out and immediately drown out a blaze, should a fire ever break out on the lower lot again. And
see, Jim, I think that the executives in the Black Tower all had a meeting and like, all right, guys, from now on, water park. That is, every ride must be. That's where Waterworld came from. That's like they're just like we. That's what we're doing. We have not had luck.
I love your take on this. Okay,
that didn't happen though, right? What did they do instead?
Well, for nearly 2 decades, they were lucky, and they never had to test their deluge, fire suppression system. But then, June 2nd, 2008, another fire breaks out on the Universal Backlot. And now this one, just to be clear, wasn't arson. Happened in the early morning hours. In fact, the first call for firefighters came in at 4:30 a.m., and it started when 3 workmen were getting a set ready down in the New York theme section of the lower lot, ready for, the production team was coming in that morning to shoot. And they had a building that they needed to look aged. And the way you age a building, especially shingles, what you can do is if you use a blowtorch, you can, sort of wrinkle these shingles. You can make them look like they've been in place for years. And time-tested technique, been used by set decorators forever. And the workmen were being careful. They were watching out for sparks. But one must have gotten by him somehow, because the next thing they know, a good chunk of the lower lot, which, by the way, by this point includes the cityscape where scenes for Spider-Man 3 had been shot back in April of 2006. By the way, that Sam Raimi movie was released in theaters May of 2007. And just so we're clear here, Spider-Man 3, not a Universal Pictures release, was made by Columbia and then released through Sony. But that set, it's going up in flames. And as for that deluge system that they put in at great expense, they were done in by Universal Hollywood's historically anemic water pressure. And again, plumbing dating back to 1910, 1920. And it just, the deluge system never worked the way it was supposed to. So the June 2008 fire, Eric, enormous amount of damage. I mean, and some of it to this day, people, talk about. Like, for example, there was a 10,000 square foot video vault on the lower lot that just burned to the ground.
Oh man, that hurts my soul. These are the original videos and stuff.
I mean, they talk about they had, original broadcasts of I Love Lucy in there. Now, mind you, there were copies elsewhere, but these were the originals.
Wow.
And Also, the 16,000 square foot building that held the King Kong encounter, that was lost. And by the way, much of Courthouse Square again. And this time around, Eric, oh my God, it took more than 12 hours to get this fire under control. And then afterwards, lots of questions. And chief among these being, it's like, look, we've had 7 fires earlier down here in the lower lot. Why is it that we are still having problems with water pressure? Isn't it now finally time to upgrade Universal's plumbing? And I'm pleased to report, as part of the repair work that was done on the heels of this devastating fire, again, June of 2008, Universal Studios Hollywood did finally do a lot of work on the lower lot in regard to plumbing and water pressure.
What is it, 10 times the charm, Jim? Like 10?
Yeah, well, there we go. There we go.
$1 billion later.
And speaking of expensive losses, that 30-foot tall, 6.5-ton animatronic ape that, by the way, that was Disney legend Bob Gurr made that through his company Sequoia. He built that for Universal back in the mid-1980s. That was lost when the building that housed King Kong Encounter went up in flames. But May of 2009, Universal announces King Kong is coming back to Hollywood. Only this time around, not an enormous animatronic, but rather he's going to be the star of a brand new cinematic experience, King Kong 360 3D. And this will be a new addition to the tram tour where guests will find themselves sandwiched between 2 200-foot long screens. And once they're told to put on the 3D glasses, these folks would then find themselves in the middle of a recreation of a memorable scene from Peter Jackson's King Kong remake. That's the one that Universal sent out into theaters back in December of 2005. And anyone who's seen this at the parks, this is when Kong is battling 3 V-Rexes, which is a prehistoric predator that Peter Jackson made up.
Yeah.
It's half T-Rex, half Velociraptor, and they battle around and on top of your tram. And anyway, King Kong 360 3D, that opens in early June of 2010, and that's 2 years after the fire in 2008. Just want to remind folks, though, that King Kong 360, just early this year, went down for rehab. In fact, that was what was kind of cool when Eric and I and the rest of the Hersey family went to Universal for the day, because we had been told when we climbed on the tram tour that, Kong 360 isn't back up yet. And then it was.
Yeah.
They surprised us. We rolled it in there. But what was different, though, is that this was the 3D free version of that part of the Universal Tram Tour. Speaking of things that guests can no longer experience when they visit Universal Studios out in Hollywood, Eric, at some point, we should probably do a feature story about on this podcast about Backdraft. That was the attraction based on the Ron Howard movie about a serial arsonist that Universal sent out into theaters back in May of '91. But the attraction, Backdraft, that operated from July of '92 to April of 2010. And what was interesting about the Backdraft attraction was that, a fire broke out inside of stage 30 on the lower lot every 8 minutes, but somehow managed not to set the rest of the backlot on fire, which, given the 7 fires that had happened at Universal Hollywood on the lower lot prior to May of 1991, kind of a surprise. But again, that's a story we'll do at another time on the Epic Universal podcast. And at this point, I think we need to wrap things up for this week's show. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, Jim, I don't know how much more fire I can have. I think I need a drink of water, actually. It's getting real hot in this hotel room all of a sudden. I don't know if that guy's out of prison yet. Hopefully he's no Santa Ana winds here in Charleston. But no, this was wow, Jim. I do want to acknowledge on Twitter, Cal Missing is a good follow, and that's where I actually saw the whole June 2008 fire. And I'm like, hey, Jim, what's going on here? And lovely that you put together all these. I had no idea that there was that many fires at Universal.
Oh, yeah. And I just want to, talk briefly about the day this was happening. I want to say CNN, had a newscopter, and hell, every station in LA had a newscopter outside of this thing. And again, the fire went for more than 12 hours. So, this amazing live shot down into, the backlot of Universal. And the thing that was especially terrifying is, again, Santa Ana winds. And, from having been on the tram tour, looking up at all of those $1 million homes that are in the hills directly over Universal Studios, that was what was especially frightening about this one. The notion that, well, what happens is that the fire marches up the hill and starts taking out houses.
Well, I know when we were there, that's the whole reason I haven't got to see a Disneyland fireworks show, because they had the Santa Ana winds last time, and they're like, no fireworks tonight. So, no, it's a real thing, and I think they need to take it serious, especially how plagued by fires the state of California has been. So,
no, absolutely.
Maybe we'll give everybody a break before we talk too much more fire. We'll give the Backdraft episode a while before we do that.
We'll back off on Backdraft. We don't mean to be insensitive, because face it, there's still a lot of people in California who are recovering from last year's fires.
Right.
But anyway, on that note, I guess that will do it for this week's edition of the Epic Universal Podcast. And that said, though, if you have suggestions for stories that you would like Eric and I to share on this podcast, please feel free to send those along via social media. And anyway, on behalf of Mr. Hersey, who's now going to go back to his hotel room, thanks for listening, and we will be back soon.